Wildroot. The first time I met Gabriel Marchand, I was guiding a group of 14 tourists down the Pisgah River during what the National Weather Service was calling elevated precipitation, which apparently was meteorologists speak for a flash flood is coming, and you're about to learn what water sounds like when it's angry. When he emerged from the trailhead with a wildfire evacuation notice and the kind of professional desperation that made me immediately understand we had approximately 90 minutes before everything got catastrophically worse. My name is Whitfield. I'm 34, a whitewater rafting guide based out of Asheville, North Carolina, which is a job that sounds recreational until you understand that I'm responsible for managing 15 people's safety in a river system that's about to transform into a hydraulic nightmare. I've been doing this for 11 years. I've seen Category 4 rivers. I've managed rescues. I've pulled people from water who thought they were drowning. What I hadn't done was manage a simultaneous flood evacuation and wildfire convergence with a forest ecologist telling me that the fire was moving faster than the models predicted. Gabriel was tall, maybe 31, with the kind of body that comes from spending your entire professional life hiking through dense forest, dark brown eyes that were processing environmental data at speed of thought, and an accent that placed him somewhere in Quebec, but raised everywhere. Canadian American, I'd learn later, parents in Montreal, graduate school in Oregon, now working for the Forest Service as a fire ecology specialist, tracking endangered plant species in the endangered forests. Whitfield, he said, and I realized he knew my name, that someone had already flagged me as critical to evacuation logistics. That's me, Gabriel Marchand, and we have a problem. He pulled out a tablet showing real-time fire mapping. The Davidson River wildfire is moving northeast at 15 miles per hour. The creek system you're responsible for is in its direct path. The precipitation event is moving in from the west. They're going to converge around 1400 hours. Your customers need to evacuate the river corridor before 1300. That gives you approximately 90 minutes. I looked at the 14 people in my rafts. 3 families, 2 couples, 1 solo traveler who told me he was celebrating his 30th birthday by facing his fear of water. None of them were expecting to become part of a natural disaster scenario. What about my guides, I asked. Your 2 assistant guides are already coordinating with the ranger station for secondary evacuation routes. I'm here to make sure the primary route stays viable. Gabriel was already moving, assessing the river depth, checking water speed. How fast can you get these people out? From here to the takeout point is normally 2 hours. In high water, maybe 90 minutes if I push, I calculated. But the takeout point, if the fire reaches it, won't be safe, Gabriel finished, which is why we're going to divert to the upper tributary. It adds 40 minutes, but it puts you on the eastern ridge. The fire's coming from the west. Eastern ridge is safe. The upper tributary is technical class 4 water, I said. Half these people haven't done class 2 before. Then you're going to have to be very good at your job, Gabriel said. I'm going to be with you. I know that river system better than anyone, and I'm going to help you keep 14 people alive for the next 3 hours. There's something about crisis that strips away normal social conventions. There's no time for small talk. There's no opportunity for typical introductions. You look at a stranger and you make an instant calculation. Can I trust this person with my life and the lives of the 14 people I'm responsible for? And if the answer is yes, you proceed. My answer was yes. The evacuation logistics took 30 minutes. Briefing the customers, distributing extra life jackets, explaining that the route was changing but not panicking them, just presenting it as a necessary tactical adjustment that would actually make them safer. Gabriel helped, and I watched him do it. How he communicated without inducing fear, how he explained complex environmental conditions in language that made sense to people who are already terrified. We pushed off at 10:35 hours. The river was already running fast. Not flood stage yet, but the water was brown with suspended soil and moving with purpose. Gabriel was in the lead raft with 3 of the customers and me navigating. I could see him pointing out features, a section of whitewater approaching, an eddy current that could catch us if we weren't precise, a rock formation that required specific approach angles, hard left, Gabriel called as we approached a rapid that I would normally run center. There's a hole developing on the right side from the upstream surge. I heard the urgency in his voice and reacted without thinking, steering hard left, feeling the raft respond to water dynamics I couldn't see, but that Gabriel, with his forest ecology background and his intimate knowledge of how water moved through terrain, could predict. We cleared the hole by maybe 6 feet. Behind us, the water roared in, and I realized that the hole Gabriel had spotted would have flipped us. Good instinct. Someone in the raft shouted. That wasn't me, I called back. That was Gabriel. He sees things in water that I'm just learning to watch for. By 11:15 hours, we were halfway through the run. The sky was starting to change color. Not dark cloud dark, but smoke dark. The air was getting thicker. The smell of burning forest was becoming visible. Gabriel was monitoring his tablet constantly, comparing real-time fire mapping to our location. "We're ahead of schedule," he said during one of our brief coordination moments when the river allowed it. "The fire's moving faster than predicted. We need to increase pace." "I can't increase pace without risking these people," I said. "I know, so we're going to have to be very precise for the next 45 minutes. He met my eyes. "Can you do that? If you keep telling me where the dangers are before I see them." Yes, he did exactly that. For the next 45 minutes, Gabriel called out water dynamics that I would have spotted 2 seconds too late. He coordinated raft positioning, so we were always in the optimal line. He managed customer anxiety by explaining what was happening in a tone that was calm and professional, and he did it while monitoring a wildfire that was actively chasing us down a river canyon. At 1200 hours, we saw smoke. Not the smell, actual thick smoke rolling down the canyon from the north, which meant the fire was moving perpendicular to our course and closing fast. "We need to accelerate," Gabriel said, and his voice had changed. Lost the educational tone, became all business. "Not dangerously, but we need maximum safe speed now. I made the call. Everyone hold tight. We're going to move faster through the next section. Gabriel, you with me?" "Always," he said. And then the rafts were moving, and the river was becoming a blur, and I was making split-second decisions about which rocks to avoid and which current lines to use. And Gabriel was there, not physically touching me, but present, calling out adjustments, reading the water like it was a language he'd learned his entire life. Behind us, the smoke got thicker. The last major rapid before the takeout, the one called Devil's Staircase, came up at 12:45 hours. Under normal conditions, it's a beautiful Class 3 run. Under these conditions, with smoke in the air and fire approaching and 14 terrified people in 2 rafts, it was the obstacle between us and safety. "Go center left through the first drop," Gabriel called. "The right side's undercut. I see the suck," I shouted back. "Then avoid it. Left line through the cascade, tight to the black rock on the other side." I steered left, felt the raft catch the line, felt water push us exactly where Gabriel said it would. We dropped through with maybe a foot of clearance on either side. Behind us, I heard the second raft do the same, heard my assistant guide's voice calling adjustments. We were synchronized. We were working as a single unit. We were going to make it. The takeout point appeared at 13:15 hours. The parking area where people were supposed to collect their stuff and go home was already crowded with rangers and emergency vehicles coordinating wildfire evacuation. The sky above the mountains was orange. We beached the rafts, started getting people out, started the process of checking for injuries, and transferring everyone to vehicles that would take them to the evacuation center. Gabriel was standing at the water's edge, watching the mountains burn, and I walked over to him. "We made it," I said. "We made it," he confirmed. "That's the most intense professional coordination I've ever experienced," I said. "Your water reading was incredible." "That's what they train us for," Gabriel said. "Reading landscapes, understanding how water and fire and weather patterns interact." He paused. "But I couldn't have done any of this without you. You made the right calls. You trusted me when I told you where to go. You kept those people safe." "We kept those people safe," I corrected, "together." He turned to look at me, and I saw something shift in his expression, something beyond professional appreciation, something that recognized that we'd worked together, truly worked together, and that had changed the equation. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay. Are you seeing anyone?" I laughed, exhausted and adrenaline-soaked, and absolutely clear on my answer. "No. Are you?" "No, but I'm thinking I'd like to be. With you." He paused. "Is that insane? We just spent 3 hours in a life-or-death situation, and now I'm considering asking out someone you met during a natural disaster." I finished. "Somewhat insane, but also maybe not. I have to go back to work," he said. "There's a fire to manage, species to protect, a disaster that's just beginning for the ecosystem." He paused. "But in 48 hours, when the immediate crisis is handled, and I can think about something other than burn patterns and endangered plants, can I take you to dinner?" "Yes," I said. "Absolutely yes." The wildfire burned for 17 days. The flash floods came and went. By day 4, most of the evacuation had been lifted, and people were allowed back to assess damage. Gabriel was in the field constantly, mapping the fire perimeter, identifying areas of critical habitat, coordinating reforestation efforts. But every evening he texted, survived another day of orange sky, found 3 endangered plants in the burn zone, managed to salvage the specimens. "The fire ecology is devastating and beautiful, and I'm documenting everything." And I texted back, "Thinking about you, can't wait to not talk about disasters. Come back safe." On day 18, when the fire was officially contained, and Gabriel had done the initial assessment work, he showed up at my house with dirt under his fingernails and smoke in his hair and absolutely zero regard for how he looked. "I haven't slept properly," he said at the restaurant. "Haven't showered since day 14, haven't thought about anything except fire behavior and ecosystem damage, and all I wanted to do was be here with you. You should have slept," I said. "You should have showered." "I know, but I couldn't stop thinking about the river, about how you read that water, about how we worked together." He was looking at me intensely. "I came to Asheville to study forest ecology. I didn't expect to find someone you met while evacuating during a wildfire convergence?" I supplied. Someone who makes me want to stop being so focused on the disaster and start thinking about what comes after the disaster, he said. Like rebuilding, like restoration. Like maybe there's something that survives the fire, and if I'm very careful and very intentional, I can help it grow. That's very poetic, I said. I'm Canadian. It's genetic, he replied, and made me laugh. We dated for 5 months while the burn zone recovered. Gabriel was simultaneously heartbroken and intellectually engaged by the ecological impact. The forest was healing, but it would take decades to fully recover. Species that had thrived for centuries were gone. New species would establish themselves. The entire ecosystem was transitioning. It's strange, he said one night, lying in my bed, looking out at the night sky where the smoke had finally cleared. When a forest burns, everyone assumes it's destruction. But fire is actually part of the natural cycle. Some plants need fire to reproduce. Some animals need burned areas to survive. The tragedy isn't the fire. It's that we've tried to suppress fire for so long that when it comes, it's uncontrolled and catastrophic instead of natural and managed. So you're saying the disaster was actually just the ecosystem reasserting itself, I asked. I'm saying the disaster was the collision of suppressed fire cycles and human infrastructure, he said. Which means the solution isn't to mourn the fire, it's to understand how to live with it, how to let it do what it's supposed to do while protecting what matters. Deep thoughts from the forest ecologist, I said. I've also been thinking about what I want to live with, he said, and I think it's you. 5 months in, at a lookout point where we could see the recovering forest already showing new growth, already healing, Gabriel asked me a familiar question. Are you seeing anyone, he asked. No, I said. Are you? I'm hoping to change that, he said, and pulled out a ring. It was white gold with a tiny carved forest, trees in profile, minimal and beautiful, Canadian and American design combined. Yes, I said. Obviously, yes. Epilogue, 1 year later. The forest had changed dramatically in a year. New growth covered what the fire had taken. Species that thrived in post-burn conditions were flourishing. Gabriel was leading an ecological restoration initiative that was becoming a model for other regions dealing with catastrophic wildfire. We got married at that same lookout point, with both our families there. My family from North Carolina, his from Quebec and from his childhood, scattered across the border. We wrote vows that referenced rivers and forests, water and fire, disasters and recovery. You taught me to read water, I said in my vows. You taught me that danger and beauty can coexist. You taught me that the worst moments can create the deepest connections, and you taught me that after the disaster passes, what you plant in the burned ground is what defines the recovery. You taught me that people matter more than ecosystems, Gabriel said in his vows. You taught me that leadership isn't about controlling the disaster, it's about guiding people through it. You taught me that the greatest strength is saying yes to someone and meaning it completely, and you taught me that home isn't a place, it's a person. 1 year after the wildfire, Gabriel was publishing research on how to integrate whitewater guide expertise with forest ecology to create more resilient recreational infrastructure. I was expanding my rafting business to include ecological education, people learning about river systems while experiencing them safely. We were collaborating in the way that made sense for us. River guide and forest ecologist, Asheville native and Canadian newcomer, two people who'd met during a natural disaster and decided the disaster wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning. Do you ever regret that day? Gabriel asked one afternoon, sitting on the deck of the house we'd bought together, looking at the recovering forest. Never, I said. That day was terrifying. But that day was also the moment I met you, even though I basically commandeered your entire professional operation, especially because of that, I said. You made me better at my job. You made me see things I wasn't capable of seeing on my own. And then you made me see that the person I wanted to spend my life with was right there in the water with me. He pulled me closer. Canadian and American, he said. River guide and forest ecologist. Complete disaster during a literal disaster. Complete perfect disaster, I corrected. And he kissed me while the forest grew around us and the river ran clean, and the mountains that had burned a year ago were already reclaiming their green.